One child is born in a remote village. The earth around him is cracked and dry. The lights flicker on only when the generator has fuel, and the local school has more broken chairs than books. His life begins with scarcity baked into every corner. Another child is born at the very same moment, but in a city of marble floors and private clinics. His family owns trust funds, vacation homes, and stocks that grow while he sleeps. Before he can even walk, his path is paved with opportunity. We're told they both live in the same world, that the game is fair, that anyone can rise if they just work hard enough. But poverty is not an accident. It's not the product of laziness, culture, or fate. It's engineered. The rules of the global economy were built to keep some nations on top and others permanently beneath them. This is the story behind the real reason poor countries stay poor, no matter how much aid they receive. And once you see how the system works, you'll never look at progress the same way again. We're told the world is getting richer. Global GDP has soared. Billions, according to development reports, have been lifted out of extreme poverty. Mobile phones light up rural villages. High-speed rail lines stretch across deserts and jungles. Skyscrapers rise in Lagos, Mumbai, São Paulo. From a distance, it looks like progress, but up close, the picture changes because while the world's wealth is increasing, the distribution of that wealth is collapsing. Today, the richest 1% own more than half the planet's assets. And in many so-called developing countries, inequality is rising faster than their economies. Yes, more homes have electricity, but many families can't afford to switch the lights on. Yes, smartphones are everywhere, but so is hunger. Yes, roads are being built, but too often they lead straight to foreign-owned mines, ports, and oil fields. So the question isn't whether progress is happening. The question is, progress for who? Because for every celebrated infrastructure project, there's a loan attached, one that must be paid back with interest. For every development success story, there's a community displaced, a resource extracted, a local industry crushed. We're told these countries are emerging markets, as if they're rising naturally. But many are still chained to debts they never chose, for projects they never controlled, with interest rates they never negotiated, trillions in aid, dozens of development banks, decades of trade deals, and still half the world struggles for clean water, basic healthcare, and decent schools. Still, the countries richest in resources remain poorest in real outcomes. Still, no matter how much is given, so little actually changes. The uncomfortable truth is this: poverty hasn't survived in spite of global development. It's survived because of how global development is designed. To see why, we have to look beyond charity, beyond headlines, beyond good intentions, because behind the slogans of aid and growth lies a system much older and far more deliberate. A system built not to uplift but to extract, and it starts with a blueprint that never truly went away. When most people hear the word colonialism, they picture a distant past. Red-coated soldiers, merchant ships, flags fluttering in conquered lands. On paper, it ended. Nations gained independence. Flags changed. Constitutions were written, but beneath the symbolism, something else remained. Because colonialism was never just about land, it was about leverage, and leverage can last long after you leave the room. Colonial empires were designed to extract, not to educate or empower. Everything from currency systems to railways to legal codes was calibrated to funnel wealth outward. Take the railways in British India, hailed as modernization, but they weren't built to connect farmers to markets or students to schools. They linked tea plantations to ports, mines to harbors. It was a logistics system for exports, not development. In Ghana, roads carried cocoa. In the Congo, rivers were militarized for rubber. In Indonesia, forests were cleared for spices, while nearby villages had no clinics or schools. And when independence came, the blueprint stayed. The CFA franc in West Africa remained pegged to France. Trade routes stayed export-heavy. Infrastructure pointed outward to global supply chains. Worse, many new states signed debt-for-sovereignty agreements. They got the flag, but not financial freedom. Mines, banks, factories often stayed in foreign hands. Touch them, and governments risked sanctions, capital flight, even collapse. So independence was real in form but limited in function. Economies were bound by mono-resource dependency, import traps, and the constant need for external approval. This is economic colonialism, the continuation of empire through markets, contracts, and debt, instead of armies. And when leaders tried to resist, they often paid the price. Patrice Lumumba in Congo, Thomas Sankara in Burkina Faso, both assassinated after challenging the order. The rules were clear: you could govern, but only if you played within acceptable boundaries. Step outside and the old empire, now wearing a suit and tie, would return, because the colonial blueprint was more than a map. It was a system built to extract wealth, limit autonomy, and keep global supply chains cheap. Today we call it development. But development for who? The roads still lead to mines, the loans still come with conditions, the profits still leave. The flags may have changed, but the blueprint, it's still being followed, line by line. Imagine your country is in crisis, inflation is spiraling, imports are stalled, debt repayments are overdue, the local currency is collapsing, and then comes the offer: a loan, a lifeline, a solution. But there's a catch. To qualify, you must slash public spending, sell off national assets, devalue your currency. Not once, not temporarily, but for as long as you're in the system. This is the IMF's formula. Born after World War II to stabilize finance, it has become the gatekeeper of global economics. When a country falters, the IMF steps in. But it doesn't just lend, it dictates. Conditions branded as reform function like economic shock therapy. The first demand, austerity: fuel subsidies cut, teacher salaries frozen, hospitals gutted. On paper, discipline. In practice, suffering. Next, privatization. Utilities, railways, and mines are sold off. Foreign firms swoop in, prices rise, and citizens rent back their own essentials. In Zambia, copper mines were sold. Billions in revenue were lost. In Bolivia, privatized water tripled in cost, sparking mass protests. Finally, devaluation. Exports may look cheaper, but for nations reliant on imports, it's suffocation. Imagine your salary stays the same while rice or medicine doubles in price. The cycle is always the same: crisis, loan, dependency, repeat. Ghana, once hailed a success, saw local farmers crushed by imports. Decades later, it still begs for bailouts. Argentina privatized everything, then defaulted on $95 billion in 2001. Millions fell into poverty, only to face another record IMF loan in 2018. Sri Lanka, in 2022, was forced to cut subsidies and welfare, sparking protests and school closures. Zambia spends more on debt payments than on health and education combined. The numbers tell it all. For every $1 in aid, poor nations pay back $2.30 in debt service. That's not help, it's reverse aid. And refusal isn't an option. Reject IMF terms and markets punish you. Credit ratings collapse, investors flee, currencies tank. This isn't rescue, it's control. Governments answer to creditors, not citizens. Corporations profit, and the cycle repeats. This is the trap. Not because countries failed, but because the system was built for them never to fully succeed. When we think of foreign aid, we imagine generosity. Wealthy nations extending a hand to those in need. Billions in grants, food, medicine, and infrastructure, all sent to help struggling countries rise. But aid isn't always about help. Often, it's about leverage, and too often, that leverage becomes a leash. On paper, the numbers are impressive. Countries like the US, UK, and EU give billions every year. Humanitarian programs, schools, clinics, roads. But buried in the fine print is a different story. Much of this is tied aid, money that must be spent on the donor's goods and services. Need food aid? You'll get it, but only from American farms, shipped across oceans, even when cheaper local grain is available. Need medicine? Only from pre-approved suppliers, often in the donor country. Need expertise? Consultants are flown in, paid with the recipient's loan money, and trained in systems that ignore local context. This isn't altruism, it's choreography. and the steps always benefit the choreographer. The impact can be devastating. After the 2010 earthquake in Haiti, the US shipped in vast amounts of rice. Noble in intent, ruinous in effect. Local farmers couldn't compete. Prices collapsed. Today, Haiti, once self-sufficient in food, relies on imports. The pattern repeats elsewhere. In East Africa, second-hand clothing donations destroyed textile industries. Shops closed, jobs vanished, value chains collapsed. Citizens got free shirts. Economies paid the hidden cost. Even when aid arrives, it rarely reaches the most vulnerable. Funds pass through central governments or foreign non-government organization NGOs, creating gatekeepers, and where the money flows often reflects politics, not need. Roads appear near capitals. Clinics are built where donors will visit, not where children are dying. Leaders learn to stay in power, you don't need votes. You need grants. NGOs too can distort the landscape. Many do valuable work, but in some regions, they function like a parallel state. In South Sudan, there are more NGOs per capita than schools. Their staff earn 10 times the local wage, drive imported SUVs, and live in guarded compounds, while the institutions they're meant to support remain weak. And because donor priorities shift constantly, HIV one year, climate the next, long-term planning is impossible. Here's the paradox. If aid worked, it would end, but it doesn't. The system isn't built to eliminate poverty, it's built to manage it. Once a country is branded an aid recipient, it's trapped, because aid isn't just about generosity, it's about power. When you control the lifeline, you don't need to control the land. You wait for the next disaster and arrive with contracts hidden in the rice bags. Some of the world's poorest countries are also its richest, not in wealth, but in resources. Oil, gold, copper, lithium, cobalt, timber, uranium, diamonds. The raw materials that power phones, cars, and cities come from beneath the soil of nations still trapped in poverty, debt, and conflict. This isn't coincidence, it's a system where the more value a country holds underground, the less power its people hold above it. Because in most of these countries, resources don't belong to citizens, they're controlled by foreign corporations. The infrastructure is foreign built, the contracts foreign written, the profits foreign held. Governments dig the ground, ship the goods, and watch the wealth leave. Take cobalt. 70% of the world's supply comes from the Democratic Republic of Congo. Yet Congo ranks near the bottom of every development index. Its hospitals crumble while foreign mining giants pocket billions. Child labor is common, rivers are poisoned, forests destroyed. Congo powers the clean energy revolution, yet remains in the dark. Nigeria is one of the world's top oil producers, but the Niger Delta, where the oil comes from, remains polluted and unstable. Militias fight for pipelines while locals live without clean water or electricity. Oil brought power to a few, collapse to the many. Venezuela holds the world's largest proven oil reserves, but dependence on a single resource combined with corruption and price crashes triggered economic collapse, hyperinflation, food shortages, millions fleeing. This is the resource curse. Economists call it Dutch disease. When oil or mining dominates, agriculture shrinks, manufacturing dies, innovation halts. Governments, flush with foreign cash, stop taxing their people. And without taxation, there's no accountability. They start answering to contracts, not citizens. The results in cratered landscapes, contaminated rivers, displaced communities, destabilized governments. And when citizens resist, they're met with riot police, militaries, or private security, funded by the very companies doing the drilling. As Ugandan scholar Yash Tandon said, Africa isn't poor, it's being looted. And not just Africa. The same script plays out in South America, Southeast Asia, Central Asia. Everywhere resources are exported cheap, refined elsewhere, and sold back at 100 times the price. This isn't failure, it's precision. Poverty in resource-rich countries isn't an accident, it's the price of obedience. Zoom out. Step back from the mines, the aid packages, and the loan contracts. A pattern emerges, so consistent, so global, that it no longer looks like strategy. It looks like reality. Poor countries stay poor, rich countries get richer. Resources flow one way, profits flow the other, and no matter what crisis strikes, the same players come out on top. This isn't a malfunction, it's a system working exactly as intended for those it was built to serve. The global economy was never designed to be fair. It was designed to be profitable, and that design favors lenders over borrowers, corporations over citizens, former empires over former colonies. Debt is now power, and ownership is leverage. Look at the IMF. Its voting structure gives the US more influence than 85 poor nations combined. That's not democracy, that's economic hierarchy. Multinational corporations operate across borders, shifting profits through tax havens, suing governments for regulating them, yet never accountable to the citizens whose futures they erode. The imbalance is written into the rules. When a bank in the West crashes, it gets a bailout. When a country in the global South defaults, it gets punished. Because the global economy isn't a marketplace, it's a battlefield, and the rules were written by yesterday's winners. Today, just 26 billionaires own as much wealth as half of humanity. Climate collapse, driven by the industries that profited most, hits the poorest first and hardest. So no, this isn't a glitch. This is the game. And if you're born on the wrong square, you're not meant to win. But systems are only agreements, and agreements can be rewritten. The question is, who benefits from the current rules, and what would it take to finally change them? You've seen the aid, you've seen the debt, you've seen the mines, the pipelines, the headlines, but now you see the pattern. Because poverty isn't the absence of wealth, it's the presence of extraction. Behind every promise of help, every glossy project, lies a deeper logic. Keep the engine running, keep the resources flowing, keep the power where it's always been. And if you want more truths buried beneath the headlines, subscribe, comment your take, and join the conversation. Because questioning the narrative is the first step to changing it. So if you're wondering why poor countries stay poor, stop asking what they did wrong. Start asking what the system did right for itself. This isn't failure, it's design. The global economy isn't broken. It works exactly as intended for those it was built to serve. So the real question is, who still benefits from it?